you're an engineer who is applying from overseas for a job in the UK, then this video can be helpful for you. As an engineer from Egypt who has been working and living in the UK for the last 11 years, I can tell you that there are effective and proven ways that you can learn and apply and potentially get sponsored for a job in the UK in the engineering sector. I have met and worked with many engineers who are originally from overseas, and I can tell you that there are three main things that could make all the big difference between applying and getting rejected or applying and having a successful outcome. Not only that, but I'll be explaining to you why some candidates find it very difficult, how people become successful or unsuccessful, and what are the main obstacles that you need to be aware of in order to learn how to deal with them and resolve some of the challenges in the way to increase your chances of becoming a successful candidate. But before we start, I want you to remember that this video is educational. Comment below the job that you are considering applying for in the UK. Perhaps I could give you some specific information and help you out with more details around that job if it is related to what I do. Now, the first thing is actually quite unknown to a lot of people, but this is something that can make a big difference to your application. It can be the differentiator between actually applying and getting feedback and applying with getting rejection after rejection, and that is actually having a plan and thinking of a plan for your application process. I haven't seen anyone explain this online before, but I can tell you from experience that having that kind of plan will set out the different areas that you need to work on. It will set out the strategy and the approaches that you can adopt in when you're applying for the job. Now, because of not having a plan, engineers will apply and apply and apply for jobs without getting any positive feedback or any feedback at all in some cases, which could leave you getting frustrated and feeling upset about the whole process. Now, having a plan means that you have an idea and you've thought through the steps that you're going to be taking in order to take you forward and help you achieve that goal of applying and becoming successful to be sponsored for an engineering job in the UK. Now, the first step in this plan that you're going to be thinking about is which jobs are you going to be targeting. And there's no point, absolutely no point in you targeting and applying for all the jobs out there. It doesn't make sense. You're going to be just faced with more and more rejection, and sometimes even not being considered at all and not given any feedback at all. So the first thing you want to be planning is understanding which roles are looking for an engineer like yourself and an engineer of the same profile such as you. And you could find out about that from the shortage occupation list. And this applies, of course, because there is a predetermined list of what jobs that the government allows or enables companies to sponsor engineers from the outside. Now, the next step and the next part of the plan that I want you to think about is how are you going to be planning for approaching the application process itself. Now, for some jobs that might mean that you're going to be tailoring your CV and you're going to be applying through an automatic system. And for other jobs, that could mean approaching the recruiter or the hiring manager. And for these two approaches, you need to be aware of the different nuances and the different techniques that you could utilize in order to make sure that your application is a strong one and stands out amongst the competition. You have to understand that when there is a role that is willing to sponsor engineers from outside of the country, you are going to be up against hundreds, if not more, of very good CVs. So you have to always think of what can differentiate your CV and your profile as an engineer and what can put you ahead of the competition. And that's a major point to think about when you're planning for how to approach that application process. You also need to think about in your plan about the companies that sponsor. There's no point in applying for a job that doesn't actually provide that sponsorship. So this is something that you need to plan for and need to check and need to always look out for in the jobs. Now, be careful because there's a lot of scam artists out there, and you have to be very aware that you are actually applying somewhere credible and somewhere reliable. The plan can also consist of a lot of other aspects, but the most important thing about it as well is doing your research And this is what I'll explain to you now. When you are researching, you have to understand where to research, what areas of research are you going to be carrying out, and how to think about the different information that you're getting, and how to decide on how to approach your application process. A very useful thing that a lot of people aren't really talking about, but I always explain to the engineers who approach me to get coached or mentored, is that you have to be looking at the similar profiles of people from similar professional backgrounds, and perhaps even from the same original country as you. Look at these profiles online on LinkedIn and see how they've transitioned, and see what kind of skills, what kind of experience, qualifications do they have that enable them to stand out from the competition, and that enable them to actually land the job in the UK from overseas. Another very important thing to research is the actual format of the interview. Now, you gotta be very prepared for the interview. The format itself can dictate whether it's one interview for both HR related matters and technical matters, let's say, or can it be a panel? So you're gonna be interviewed by a panel of technical members that are going to be testing your knowledge and testing your experience and asking you questions about your ideas and ambitions. But also it could be understanding the idea that you are going to have to attend a series of interviews, maybe 2, perhaps in some cases 3, where you could go through a selection process. So all this is good to research and understand about, so that you are prepared as much as possible for the questions and for the day of the interview. Needless to say, and this is common practice, but a very important thing to do here as well to increase your chances of success is researching the market. Now, in terms of short term, long term, and of course medium term, when we say research the market, you have to understand a lot more about the UK market before going into the interview, because this will reflect on how you answer questions around your ambitions, around your medium to long-term goals. Now remember, sponsoring an engineer from outside of the UK can be costly for the companies or the organizations doing it. So it's a kind of investment that they would want to check that they are investing in the right person. And one of the strongest indicators that you are that right person and the right fit for the role is that you're able to articulate and talk about how your role develops in the medium term, the long term, and of course how your ambition fits the requirements of the organization and the expectations of the role. Now that we have talked about how to approach a plan and how to think of researching the different areas and aspects that could make a difference and increase your chances of success, it's very, very important that you do that one last thing when you are applying for jobs in the UK. And that thing, again, makes a big difference. From personal experience, this is something that's very effective if utilized properly. And that is, don't just apply, but try to build connections with the people that you interact with throughout the interview and hiring process. It could happen that you're going to be applying time after time for roles or jobs that are similar, but in different organizations, and getting mixed responses, sometimes good feedback, sometimes an invitation to interview, and sometimes you could be just getting rejections. Now, no matter what the outcome is, don't let that application and your effort go to waste, and I'll explain how. When you apply, sometimes your application will be unsuccessful, and that can be frustrating and disheartening. We all have been there. But it's very important to not let that effort and that trial go to waste, as we said. So try to always request feedback in a concise and simple manner, meaning that you start your message by thanking that person and showing gratitude that you've been given feedback and given an opportunity to be considered. After that, you could always explain why you're looking for feedback very, very briefly, but stating something as simple as saying that you're actually after constructive feedback so that you can learn from the experience and find more success in the near future would be more than enough. And then it could help that you actually pinpoint the areas that you felt you didn't really perform well throughout the interview or the application process. But you could always get to the point and suggest that they give you feedback on your communication style, your level of experience, or your skill set or qualifications. So try to limit the scope of what you're asking for in terms of getting direct and constructive feedback from the person who's interviewed you or the person who's handling your recruitment process. When you request feedback in that way, most people will appreciate it, and hopefully a lot of them will actually go out of their way to give you good constructive feedback for you to learn from and carry on in your next application process. Another way to actually learn from this experience is to politely, of course, request that you stay in touch, whether over email or over LinkedIn. And in this way, you could be one of the first people to know when another role or future jobs are advertised, and perhaps that could be a good chance to be given the opportunity again to apply and be selected. But no matter what you do, don't burn bridges and don't act in a unprofessional way. It's very important that you keep on maintaining that impression that you are very professional as you are, and that you are going to be a strong addition to the team, and that you're also a person who is persistent and doesn't give up easily. You could always apply again once you've filled the gaps that have actually affected your application. We all have gaps, whether it's in knowledge or skill sets, in experience, or sometimes in qualifications, and that's very normal. What matters is that you have to understand and learn about these gaps and how to fill them in order to increase your chances in the next application process and become more and more successful next time. Now, I cannot cover everything in one video, so I'll be making more of these videos. So please make sure to send me or comment any questions you might have on this topic or any other topics when it comes to developing your career in engineering. And if you want to learn more about how to plan for a successful career in engineering, check out that video, and don't forget to send me all your comments and questions. All the best. Take care.